Huh, can't do that. Um, so most of you know that I started this channel with the idea of doing a channel for aging. It didn't actually end up that way right away. As a matter of fact, it ended up being a channel because of a viral video I had that I have 25,000 subscribers, and many of them are subscribed because they want to learn how to start a YouTube channel. I don't know anything about starting a YouTube channel. Come on, I barely know what I'm doing. I'm not a guru. I do have some ideas of stuff to share. This particular live stream is not going to be about starting a YouTube channel. If you ask questions about that, you can go back to the last live stream. I'll do another live stream in a couple of weeks more about YouTube. But today I want to concentrate on giving you some background of my why. Why in the world am I even doing this, and what are my goals, or what's my desire in doing a YouTube channel? Old Mike, old me, living better. Welcome to the channel. You know my motto: if you ain't dead, you ain't dead. Done. So I love the book Start with Why. Maybe you know about it. The second book of Find Your Why. I'll put links in the description once the live stream has gone live, and I will put it up there. Hey, AJ, good to see you here. The For the last 50 years, I've been living out this idea, my passion, old me living better. It's taken on different perspectives over the years, but it is based on the idea that every day for the last 50 years, I spend the first hour of the day uh, reading, writing in my journal. I started some 40 years ago in that journal writing, asking myself a question. Now, that question has changed over the years, but it's a question that ended up defining my life, actually defining my life. The question that I've come up with now that I ask myself every morning, and it's based on old me living better. Here's my question in my journal that I start every day: how can I live better today? Not how can I live better in 10 years, not how I could have lived in the past. How can I live better today? It kind of goes with the theme that some YouTube gurus talk about, and I think it really makes sense, is that every time you post a video, you want it to be 1% better than the day before. So I write this question to myself: what am I going to do better today? How am I going to live better today? And it's a question that demands a CTA, a call to action. A call to action. So a lot of times, and by the way, the question is, how am I going to feel better today? Now, if I'm going to feel better today, I'll go out and buy a Ferrari. That'll make me feel better today, right? But no, this is, how am I going to live better today? Sometimes it's involved in feeling, but most of the time, the CTA, sometimes it can be, a big CTA. I need to call somebody. I need to do this. I need to do that. Sometimes it's very small. I need to wear a different pair of shoes today because yesterday the shoes that I wore didn't really fit well, and I got a blister. Okay, so sometimes the CTAs, I'm going to live better today, and it's small increments. The small increments are very important because each day I want my day to be better than the day before. And you can do this at 20 years old or 30 years old or 40 years old. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. I want to do these CTAs for the day that I'm living it in. I want my day to day to be at least one step better than the day before. So last year I started thinking about starting a YouTube channel, and it was going to be about aging. Most of you know that I've worked with seniors since I was 48 years old. I'm 81 years old now. Uh, I have done 200 funerals. I have sat with over 100 people while they've died. I have some experience in watching people from the age of 65 to 111, how they've lived their life and how their life has ended. I've learned a lot in that. Starting at 48 years old, working with people in their 80s and 90s was a cultural shock for me. When I started thinking about starting this YouTube channel, I wanted to do something around my passion, my why. What is my why? And I was driving in the car with my wife to the beach one day, and Keb Mo, we had a Keb Mo album on. I love Keb Mo. Do you love Keb Mo? Tell me. And he has a song called Old Me Living. Now, it has a total different theme to what I'm doing. But when that song came on, it hit me. Old me living better. That's been my passion all of my life, helping people to live better every single day, one day at a time. And I think that when that hit my as an epiphany to my understanding, I said, that's it. I'm going to start a channel, Old Me Living Better. And then, my motto, which I've lived by for years and years now, is uh, if you ain't dead, you ain't done. That's from my merch store. And it's the idea that no matter how old you are, you're not done unless you're dead. You're not, if you're alive at 20, you're not dead, but you're not done. And, just because I started a YouTube channel at 80 years old, that has encouraged people. I can't believe how many people tell me how encouraged they are simply by the fact that here's an 80-year-old ancient guy starting a YouTube channel that took off like lightning. And I get all these comments. Man, if you can do it, so can I. But the encouragement is for me. I encourage you to do what I do. Ask yourself the question, how am I going to live better today? What am I going to do a little bit better today? So that's sort of my backstory to the channel. I want to cover four things. Let me look in the chat here for a moment and see kind of what's going on. I said hi to AJ. Hi, Madeline. Prodigal Aquarius. Love Agenda. Um, Thank you. I'm glad I'm inspiring. I don't know. Yeah. Dr. Alfredo did your PhD, just turned 62, and pray to reach 90 to see my granddaughters graduate from college, get married, and give me some great grandchildren. Oh, I love that. That's great. So living to 80, that's kind of the subject of this. I have four things. Now, my intent was to do a live chat to maybe get some feedback to see how interesting this might be for people, because it's more of the theme of my channel and where I want to go in the future. I'll always be doing a segment of the channel and creating a YouTube channel, but I wanted to instead also get back to my core mission. So I have four pillars for growing to be 80 years old, and I'm going to turn this into a long form video at some point. But here they are: how to take advice, how to live, how you live. Number three, how you think, and number four, how you adapt. Those are the four things that I've learned in my 80 years. Now, I got a question, I think it was either from Diane and Kathy, one of the two of my subscribers and friends in the last chat, about what advice would you give to your 50-year-old self? I've pondered that question for quite a while. Unfortunately, I have an answer for it. Are you ready for the answer? What advice would I give to my 50-year-old self? Here's the answer. It wouldn't make any difference. I could go back to my 50-year-old self Give my 50-year-old self some great advice. My 50-year-old self would not listen to it. How do I know? Because when I was 50 years old, I had a mentor and a wonderful friend give me advice on a business thing that I was going to get involved with. Did I listen to them? No, I didn't listen to them. I got all kinds of advice from people on this particular thing that I was going through. And if I went back and told my 50-year-old self, you're an idiot, don't do this, I probably would not have listened. So what happened? 2 years later, I was in bankruptcy. That's right. I didn't listen to the advice. Here's the problem: as we age and as we grow, people have a hard time taking advice. Here's my take on taking advice. There's four parts to taking advice. I'll expand this in a long form video a little more maybe. Listen, evaluate, test, and then accept or reject. Listen, evaluate, test, accept, or reject. So the first thing is you got to listen. My problem was I wouldn't listen. I didn't listen to the advice. Can you believe that? Because I didn't listen to the advice, I ended up in bankruptcy. I had to start all over again. The second step of taking advice is to evaluate. The first thing is you listen to it. You don't judge the advice. You just take it in. You just listen to it, and then you evaluate the advice that you've been given. After you evaluate it, there is another step 3, which is to test that advice. Testing advice involves a little bit of the evaluation, but you run some models on that advice, and you look at other people that have taken that advice or ignored that advice. So you test the advice. After you've listened, evaluated, and tested it, then the decision is to accept it or reject it. Now, I have a confession to make. I've been married 60 years. Are you ready for this? Uh, my wife has been 99% correct and on spot with the advice she's given me. Have I always followed her? No. I haven't taken her advice any better than I've taken anybody else's advice. But her advice has been 100%, almost 100%, all of the time. Why is it that we are resistant to taking advice? Because we like to be in control. We don't like anybody telling us what to do. We don't understand that people that give us advice have a different perspective. I need a different perspective on my life all of the time. If you expect to live to be 80 and live better growing to be 80, you need to learn how to take advice. You need to learn how to listen, evaluate, test, accept, and reject. So, what about you? Maybe share in the comments. Have any of you not taken advice and it's worked out bad? Maybe it worked out good. Of course, not all the advice you get is ever going to be 100% spot on. Yeah, there's going to be times that it's not. That's for sure. So, number 2, how you live. I love this one. I've learned this one from working with seniors, and it's a scary process. Here it is: how you live is how you will die. How you live is how you will die. I have sat at the bedside of over 100 people while they've died. I've been through the process of the end of life process, sat with hospice nurses, sat with family, seen people go through, an hour, a day to a month to 2 months of the dying process. Now, here's the shocker: if there were angry people in life, they're angry in death. If there were happy people, well adjusted people in life with a positive attitude, they die much better. Give you an example. I had two people that I visited in a nursing home a couple of years ago. And one was complaining about the food, complaining about this and that, negative about everything else, negative about the doctors, all of this. Guess what? They were negative all of their life. Now they're still alive, but they're also still negative. The other person was 100 years old. I think she was 98 at the time. She's 100 now. And I went into her room, which is only 2 rooms away from the person that's complaining and yelling and screaming and upset with the nurses and the doctors and everything else. And that person's condition was not nearly as bad as the next person I visited, this dear little lady. And so I go in and she's peaceful and goes, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing really good." "Well," I said, "your diagnosis is not so hot." She said, "I know, but I'll get through it." And then he said, "Well, what about the what about the food? Do you like the food?" "Well, it's not the best, but it's okay." What about the nursing staff?" "Oh, they're not always on time, but that's okay." What a difference in the attitude. What a difference in the attitude. If you're a judgmental person in life, you will be a judgmental person in death. I have seen people that have used imposter syndrome or hidden behind a personality, and they seem like the sweetest people. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. And then during the last stages of their life, I get a call from a friend or family member. "You got to get over here quick. Grandma's cussing like a sailor. We've never heard her use a cuss word in her entire life." Now, I do understand that dementia and Alzheimer's can be contribute to that. I understand that. But just getting it done said to me, I like what she said. "My pastor said the cure for a miserable heart is gratitude." And I really believe in that. As a matter of fact, the lady I was just talking about, I mean, she was the most giving person and she was thankful. Her entire life was one of giving gratitude for the people in her life, as opposed to the other person, which was a guy. He was not. Matter of fact, when his wife, oh, I better not share all this stuff. I will. When his wife passed away, he spent the next year bad-mouthing his wife when she's dead. He was bitter. He was in a long-term bitter marriage, and he stayed bitter. Do you hear what I'm saying? You see why it's so important to old Mike, old me living better is to live better every day. Get rid of your judgment. Get rid of all of the negative characteristics. If people around you say, "Hey, man, you're a judgmental person. You're always angry. You never forgive anybody." You need to take that to heart. That's advice that you need. Because if you don't, when you get really sick at the end of your life, I got to tell you, you're going to be miserable. One of the most wonderful people that I've known had so many physical issues. And while she was in the hospital, off and on during the last year or two of her life, she blessed everybody in that hospital. She prayed for everybody in that hospital. The nurses wanted her as a patient. I have relatives that are nurses, and I can tell you they don't want you as a patient if you're one of these kind of patients is always complaining, ringing the buzzer, "Get over here, you're late." People love this lady. She's very sick. She had every reason to complain, but throughout her life, she was not a complainer. Throughout her life, she accepted life and she lived life to the fullest and probably full of gratitude. Number 3 of my 4 pillars of living to be 80. How you think. Let me check. Somebody asked the question, can you talk about the best way to learn storytelling? I'll address that because it's more related to creating a YouTube channel. Having gratitude is so important. Absolutely. Thank you for showing us what's truly to honor the gift of life with grace and depth. Oh, wow. Yeah, I agree 100%. So how you think now? This one, because I've got some dear friends, Kathy, who has a Simply Fit Physical, and she's helped me a lot. But what do I mean by number 3? How you think? How you think about physical versus emotional well-being. Let me ask you a question. In the last 2 years of your life, do you want to be physically fit or mentally fit? Think about it. This is not going to be a tirade against staying physically fit. I got too many friends that would get on my case. So it's not about that. But I have seen some of the most physically fit. I got several. Thank you, David. I agree. I got several dear friends. I mean, they're 85, 95 years old, and they can still do 25 to 50 push-ups. I could do 100 push-ups when I was in the Marine Corps. I don't know how many I could do now. Maybe 1 or 2. But it's been my experience seeing so many people, even those who have been physically fit, and they oftentimes pride themselves. My mother was one, my adoptive mother. Bless her heart, I love her. She was cross country skiing at 85, 87 years old. She died at 89. But I mean, she was cross country skiing up until 2 years before she died. But that last year of her life, all the physical uh, vitality that she had went out the window. And it exposed the emotional weakness that was under all of that. Now I can say this because I've been working with seniors for a long time. And in the church that I pastor, I often jokingly ask this, do you want to be physically fit or mentally fit before you die? 100% raise their hands for mentally fit. Nobody wants to have dementia and Alzheimer's over the last 2 years of their life. You've heard me talk about Selma before. In Actually, she's in my very first video. She lived to be 111. 111. She had some physical problems. I mean, she was as sharp as a tack at 111 as she was at 50. The lady amazed me. And she had a sense of humor. She laughed at everything. She was such a wonderful person, even though she ended up in the hospital, ended up in assisted living. And because she had lived her life well, managed her finances, she was able to, most people hope they save enough money to live in assisted living for 2 or 5 years. She had to do it for like 10 years or something like that. I don't know. Well, she drove her car until she was 103, I think. But I loved going to visit her because she was so emotionally, mentally collected. So why do I spend the time I have? I'm 24 minutes into this video. Why have I talked so much about this particular thing? Because the emphasis on the physical, the diet, how I eat, how I walk, it's all important. I don't discount any of that. And sometimes the physical is really related to the mental. I know that. But we spend more time on the physical push-ups than we do on the mental push-ups. I need to exercise my mind. Living better every day involves reading, involves doing things that stimulate my mind. It's so important to do that. It's so important to be engaged, to be socially engaged with other people, to have conversations. I love FaceTime and Marco Polo. With my family, I FaceTime with them often. It's wonderful to do that. And they're spread out all over the country, so I can't, they can't come over and I can't go over to see them. But because we're able to communicate through FaceTime, it's like seeing them every day, having a conversation every day. We use Marco Polo a lot. That's fun. We have group Marco Polos. All of that is wonderful. It's so important to stay mentally fit. I think the emotional part is not emphasized enough. I don't discount physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness is so important. Let's see, Bouquet Bushido. The most heartbreaking clients I work with are those who grow old, clinging to resentment. Yeah, you know, reminiscing can be so good for those of us that are seniors. I get calls from the kids, the people in my church oftentimes. Can you get grandpa to stop telling the same story over and over again? Well, guess what? I've been a member of the American Society of Aging for, I don't know, 30 years or so. There's a subset that of that organization that really zeroes in on reminiscing. Reminiscing is healthy. It's creative. Now, I know that somebody asked about storytelling. I love telling stories, but I have to admit that my stories get better as I get older. Why is that? Because your brain doesn't remember everything, so you start filling in stuff. So the stories that you told 5 years ago are much better now than they were 5 years ago because you've added to them, you've embellished them. Nobody remembers perfectly, right? Unless you have eidetic imagery, maybe photographic memory. So reminiscing is powerful, and it's part of, I think, emotional health. Reminiscing is mental health. Yeah, you may tell the story over and over again, but there is a catharsis in there. There is a sense of being able to uh, release and relive. Now, the reminiscing needs to be focused on the positive. I have counseled and been with people who reminisce on all of the bad. And unfortunately, that's very tragic. Because if you're reliving the bad over and over and over again rather than the good, that can be destructive rather than helpful. Question from Buka. Do you see a link between victimhood and aging poorly? Yeah, I think a victimhood mentality, especially as you get older and you get into, let's say, the dying process, when you get to the physical point where you've been diagnosed that way, especially if you go into a hospice situation, that unfortunately it can be very, very destructive. Let me just put it that way. All of the different feelings or identifiers that we would connect with personality. Uh, they all have a downside in that they they do not build us up emotionally, they tear us down emotionally. Having a victimhood mentality will tear us down rather than build us up. Hey, AJ, we'll see you later. So, number four, I'm doing pretty good. 29 minutes. Maybe we'll end early. Number four, I think, is the most important of the three. The first one was learning to take advice, listen, evaluate, test. Number two is how you live. How you live is how you will die. Number three is to concentrate on emotional health as much or more so than physical health. And number four is learning to adapt. Now, I have a whole video on, on this topic where I use what I learned in the Marine Corps, and it's in the movie Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood, Gunny Highway. He uses it, I think, 6 or 7 times in the movie. And in different situations, he will say to somebody, well, here's how we do it in the Marine Corps: we adapt, we improvise, and we overcome. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome. So you see me putting my glasses on and off. Okay. I've been doing that now, 50 years or more. Had to have cataracts removed, so I've had to wear glasses. Well, what did I do? I went to the optometrist because it wasn't seeing very good, and he said, "You need glasses." Well, I can say, I don't want to wear glasses. I'm going to look too old. I don't like the way glasses work or look. You either adapt to your situation or you suffer the consequences of it. Now, that's a simple thing. Unfortunately, it's tragic if you do not learn in life to adapt to circumstances in old age. And when you get to be me at 80 years old, you're going to be in for a shock because the body naturally begins to wear down. Right now, I've got a nerve impingement in my back because of a spinal cord cyst that was removed. I may be facing surgery, I don't know. But I'm having to use a walker. I cannot tell you how many times in 35 years of pastoring a congregation of seniors, church is never large, 100 to 150, but the very first church that was there when I came, they're all in heaven or somewhere. Second church also. When I came at 48, I got people that are 80 and 90 in that. They're all gone. So I've pastored 3 churches. I took a count one time. I had a church of 1,500, but most of them are gone. Tragically, I have to say this. I haven't sat down and counted them. I'm gonna say 10 to 12 people over the 35 years I've been in this congregation have died because of pride. Are you hearing me? They've died because of pride and failure to adapt. The doctor said, "You need to use a cane. You need to use a walker." Their kids say, "You need to use a walker. You need to use a cane. You need a mobility device. You need to stop doing this or that." And I get comments from people who say, "I'm not gonna use a cane. That'll make me look old." Hey, look at me. I am old. I'm there, man. I'm there. I am old. Part of accepting life. Yeah, I hate to say that I'm always irritated a little bit by people that are 80 years old and they're acting like teenagers. I won't say who, but I have a close relative that does that. Matter of fact, she got her first tattoo when she was 83 because her grandkids were getting tattoos. Probably nothing wrong with that. I don't want to be too harsh with that. But, it makes more sense to act your age. If you're 80 years old, you don't have to act like you're 40 or 30 or a teenager for sure. So I get advice from a doctor, from family. Use a walker, use a cane. And several of the people that I loved dearly, they didn't do that. They tripped over things. They fell over things. And when you're my age, the worst thing you can do is fall. The next worst thing is to go in the hospital and get pneumonia and die. Several of the people that I just referenced, the 10 or 12 people, they didn't die from the fall. They died from pneumonia in the hospital. You don't want to go to the hospital. Don't let pride stand in the way of adapting to how you need to adapt as you age. But we have to adapt all the way along the line. You can be 20 years old or 30 years old. You need to learn how to take advice at 30 years old. You need to know how to live at 30 years old so you can die better at 80 years old. At 30 years old, you need to develop emotional and mental stability no matter how strong you are, so you'll have that when you're 80 or 90. And you need to learn to adapt to things in life and not be prideful about what's going on for the purpose of being able to live healthy and strong. I'm so sorry for the people that I love so dearly. And I don't mean to be very that critical with them because I'm facing that myself. I'm looking around for a scooter. A scooter is if you're on a scooter, you look like an old person. Now I'm looking at the Ferrari of scooters. I may talk about that in the future. I don't know. I have the Ferrari of walkers, by the way. My walker is not a regular walker. I have an acre walker that's carbon fiber, costs $750. But man, I tell you, I look hot. I'm an old guy that looks pretty good on a walker, right? I get stopped all the time. Where'd you get that at? Well, I'll tell you, but it costs 750 and then they walk away. So isn't it interesting how so much of this is tied to humility? And I see people in the chat room talking about that. It's really important that we understand that, Proverbs says, it doesn't say pride goeth before a fall. Look it up. It says pride goeth before destruction, destruction before a fall. Don't have the address off the top of my head. I'll put it down in the description later. But pride leads to destroying things in my life, destroying relationships, destroying the ability to take advice, destroying the ability to live in such a way that I will die good, the ability to distinguish between the emotional and the physical and make good choices, and the ability to adapt as I live older. Okay, I'm just about done. 37 minutes. If anybody has any questions, you better ask them now because I'm going to jump off of here pretty quick. Let me see kind of stuff. Such a good point, Mike. Maybe adapting takes a lot of willingness or humility. Yeah, I don't know. I look at my life and what I've had to adapt to. And the problem is you can choose to adapt or you can be forced to adapt. You can choose to adapt or you can be forced to adapt. I have a situation now with a lady that needs to be in a retirement home, assisted living, but she's digging in her heels. The family has done everything. I live in California, and in my county, if somebody digs in their heels, you can file with elder services, uh, protective services. You can file with social services. You can get them declared by a doctor. You have all that information. Take over the finances as their kids. If they dig their heels in, you're not going to move them. At the core is pride and humility, and they have plenty of money to get into assisted living, but they refuse to go. The next step, which is a more severe, takes longer, that the family has to get conservatorship. So I'm going to have to sit down with that family and I'm going to have to say to this person, you know, this is what is going to happen. You're going to voluntarily go into assisted living, or your family's going to get conservatorship. They're going to show up with the sheriff, knock down your door, and drag you to assisted living. What's your choice? And as I look at the core of that, it's so sad because life could be so much simpler and better. So Madeline says, any obstacles in setting up this channel? Uh, that's more related to YouTube creation, which I didn't want to talk about that much, but I didn't set it up for that. So I will answer that question. No, there were not a lot of obstacles. If you go back and watch my video on how I started a channel at 80 years old, I pretty much explain it there. I spent 3 months in planning it, learned all the mechanics, launched it. And in the first 3 weeks, I was doing pretty good. And now I have 25,000 subscribers. Busy after 60. Just stumbled on your live stream. I'm not usually home on Fridays. I'm always happy to see your videos and learn from your wisdom. I don't know how wise I am, but you know, my dog thinks I'm pretty wise. Poor Mickey. Pride, doing life on my own terms apart from God. Chances of destruction seem to be pretty high. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I love doing these live streams. They're a lot of fun. I can just ramble on and on and on. And then after I post it, I can take it out some of the ramblings. I'm so grateful that you joined today. It's been a lot of fun. And I'm going to take all of this, I'm going to put it uh, into a long form video, summarize some of this, and see if I can make sense of it in a long form video. You guys have a great time. I really enjoyed you all being here. Have a great day. Old Michael, me living better. Remember, you can live better at any age and live a little bit better each day. If you ain't dead, you ain't done. I'm assuming since you're here, you're not dead. So you're not done. You got things to do. See you next time.